So I'll start with some background to provide the context of um, what this project means and why we're doing the work and where it fits into stock assessment and fishery management. So striped bass are the most released saltwater sport fish in the country, which means that for every bass that recreational anglers release, 11 more are, every one that they harvest, 11 more are released back to the sea. And Massachusetts leads the Atlantic states in the number of releases, more than 3 times higher than the next closest state of Maryland. And currently, the largest source of mortality on the stock comes from these recreational releases. And the central part of the estimation of these recreational release mortalities is what's called the discard mortality rate, which is currently set at 9%. And this value comes from a prior mass DMF study that was conducted in the early 1990s by our former director, Paul Diodati. And although the stock assessment assumes that this 9% value applies to all recreational releases along the coast, fishery managers have recently begun to recognize that different fishing practices can result in differential rates of discard mortality. And this is the logic that underlies the recent regulation that requires recreational anglers to use circle hooks when targeting striped bass with baited hooks. So why are we revisiting striped bass discard mortality when we completed a study 30 years ago designed to estimate this? Well, for one, we expect that the discard mortality rate has changed over the years, and in part due to these regulations. We'd also like to identify which factors most affect the post-release survival of striped bass so that we can offer guidance to fisheries to help them minimize their discard mortality. And lastly, there are some reasons why the study completed in the early 1990s may not be all that representative of the coast-wide fishery. And I'll just briefly describe how that earlier study was conducted. So Paul Diodati acquired his striped bass, just over 1,000 striped bass that were captured via fish weirs in Rhode Island. And after being transported on the deck of a boat in a tank for a couple hours, they're brought to shore, transferred to a stocking truck, and brought overland to Salem, Massachusetts to what's called Smith Pool, which is an experimental tidal impoundment at our Cat Cove Marine Lab. So not exactly a representative typical recreational capture and handling. Angling groups were brought in to fish on these captive bass over the course of the summer, and 173 of the fish were captured and their tag IDs were noted, released back to the pool. And at the end of the experiment, the end of the summer, the pool was drained and 15 fish could not be found. And they were presumed to have died due to their recapture handling process and consumed by scavengers. Now, this also assumes that any other source of mortality would be negligible, when in fact it may have been elevated due to their confinement. So things like predation from avian predators like osprey, perhaps poaching from neighborhood anglers, or disease or starvation, because this is a large number of fish to be kept in a relatively small area for a long period of time. And finally, the size of the fish used in the study was substantially smaller than the size of fish that are released by the fishery. Its average size of only about 12 inches. Well, fortunately, there's been some advances in the methods to estimate discard mortality over the years. And over the past decade, really, Mass Division of Marine Fisheries, in cooperation with the New England Aquarium, UMass, University of New England, has completed a series of studies that have laid a really solid framework for estimating discard mortality rate at the fishery scale. And using some recreational groundfish species as the initial examples, we're now adapting these methods to striped bass. Now, each of these projects have followed this sort of 3-step recipe. So in the first step, A here, we will capture fish under typical recreational conditions. We'll quickly tag them with an acoustic transmitter and release them right back to the same environment. So they experience natural prey and predator conditions. These transmitters are typically equipped with a sensor that may record pressure, so it gives you a depth data stream, or accelerometers that give you an index of tailbeat frequency. And these allow us to monitor the fate of these fish remotely at the individual level, so we can determine which fish have died afterwards. Now, the major problem with acoustic telemetry is that it's an expensive business. Each of these tags are around $600, and the receivers that we need to deploy to be able to detect our tagged fish are several $1,000s. So to be able to have an array large enough to monitor these fish over an extended period of time may cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so we're really limited in the sample size and how many of these fish we can directly observe mortality on. And this is important for a species like striped bass, who are pretty robust, and most of the fish that are released survive. So partly due to this sample size, we often find that there is a single predictor that is the most parsimonious description of mortality rate, and that is this semi-quantitative release condition score that every fish is assigned. We typically use 4 levels. So condition 1 is an uninjured fish, hooked in the mouth, swims away completely normally. Condition 2 would be a fish with minor injuries. 3, a fish with major injuries. And then 4 is an apparent mortality, a fish that's unable to swim away. Now, the next phase of these projects are to then go back out and observe a large number of fish with their release condition, and then pair that with observations of a suite of variables that describe either the fish, the fishing technique, or the environment from which the fish was captured. And because this is simply going out and catching fish and writing down observations, it's inexpensive, doesn't require tagging, and we can accumulate a large number of these. And we can also enlist volunteers to help us to get as many and as representative a data set as possible. The last step of these projects is to then, once we've identified which variables are important predictors of release condition and in turn mortality, we need to then describe those variables for the entire coastwide fishery. So this first phase of the project, we've already completed for striped bass. In 2020 and 2021, we tagged almost 350 striped bass with acoustic transmitters, and we monitored them over the course of a summer for their survival. And we found, as expected, that there was a single predictor that was the most parsimonious description of mortality rate, and that was this release condition score. We found that fish that were uninjured, these condition 1 fish, only about 1% of those fish ended up dying afterwards. The fish with minor injuries, condition 2, about 1 in 10 of them did not survive. A little less than half of the fish with major injuries, condition 3, did not survive. And our condition 4 fish are what we can call apparent mortalities, fish unable to swim. We actually tagged several of these as well, just to confirm that they don't have some sort of miraculous recovery. It's very complicated for data if you have zombie bass coming back from the dead afterwards. So we're currently engaged in this second phase of the project, which is to collect a large number of observations of fish release conditions. And this is where our citizen scientists are come in. And so we're asking our anglers to record things like the size of the fish, where the hook is attached, note any injuries or its ability to swim after it's released, record the fight and handling time. We ask them to describe the lure or bait types that they use, the number and type of hooks, and then we also ask them to record the air and water temperature on the day that they go fishing. And from these data, we're able to assign fish to one of these condition scores, and then look for patterns and correlations with these set of variables. And the third phase of the project will be starting in 2024. We'll be sending out surveys of anglers to try to identify and describe the tackle choices that they use throughout the year and all up and down the coast. So we weren't sure how many citizen scientists would be willing to record data while they're striped bass fishing, but we budgeted for 500 sampling kits to start. And so the first 500 folks who signed up received a digital thermometer, record air and water temperature, a stopwatch to record the fight and handling times, and a tape measure to capture the fish size. And to get people beyond just signing up, but start recording, collecting, and submitting data, we sent folks a pair of nice fishing pliers after they sent their first report in. And then to keep engagement up, keep people continuing to participate, we had this idea of having weekly raffle prizes so that anyone who submitted at least one report over the prior week were enrolled in the raffle. One of our early signups for Become a Citizen Scientist was Kevin Blinkoff, who's the executive director of On the Water Media. It's a really popular regional saltwater fishing website, magazine, TV show, podcast. And he made this great 60-second Instagram reel that describes what it was like to be a participant in this program. And he does a really good job. So I'm just going to play that for you here quickly.
So I signed up to be part of the Striped Bass Release Mortality Citizen Science Initiative by the Massachusetts Fish and Marine Fisheries. And they sent me this cool package full of stuff, along with a letter explaining how to take part. But the first thing I had to do was go fishing and catch a striped bass. Once out there, I took the air temperature, took the water temperature, and then put on a Z-Man lure and started fishing. It's early spring, so looking for scoopies in this back bay where the water's starting to warm up a bit. The purpose of the study is to gather information on how striped bass are caught, what the water temperature is, how long we fight them for, how long we keep them out of the water, and then how well they swim away. This should give us better information on how striped bass survive being caught and released. When I hooked the fish, I immediately started the stopwatch timer so I could time how long the fight takes. Once I landed the fish, glanced at the stopwatch to see how long the fight took, just 20 seconds for this little guy. Took note of where the fish was hooked, right in the mouth. And it looked like he's in good condition. Popped the hook out, got a quick measurement. Little guy, and, well, he swam away just fine. A glance at the stopwatch told me how long the fish was out of the water. Then back home, all I had to do was fill out my data sheet, take a picture of it, send it to striper@mass.gov, and just like that, I'm a citizen scientist.
So when Kevin posted this on their Instagram feed, we saw a really big spike in people signing up for the program. And this was really a turning point for us where we recognized the importance of partnering with fishing groups, fishing organizations to try to amplify our message. And so we really sought out partnerships with other groups. And as folks became aware of the project, different groups contacted us and wanted to partner with us. So the folks at Salty Cape TV, which is a fishing show production company, generously hosted our research team for a day of guided fishing in Vineyard Sound in the spring. And they produced a really high production quality video that walks us through a day of doing this citizen science work. We got a chance to explain why we're doing it, what it means. And we had underwater footage of fish being released. We had drone footage of fish. You could see them hitting our topwater lures. And it's this sort of like high production value that really brings out a lot more views, a lot more engagement with a project like this than we might be able to do just through our own state agency websites or social media channels. We also did some podcast interviews, and these we focused on early on in the season in March and April, when avid striped bass anglers are really getting pumped for the season and consuming all sorts of online information, media about striped bass. And we found out afterwards that many of our participants found out about the program through these interviews. We also were really fortunate to have a partnership with this smartphone app development company, Got One Media. These are seasoned commercial app developers, and their team also happens to be a bunch of really avid striped bass anglers, and they really wanted to be a part of the striped bass conservation story. So they adapted their fishing log app to collect the fields necessary for this work, even adapting, adding in a voice-enabled data collection so that you can sort of just yell at your phone to start recording your fight and handling times. Auto-populates air and water temperatures from some online climatic databases. And best of all, it's free to users and was free to us. We had our plan of giving away these raffle prizes, and so we budgeted for 12 weeks of raffle prizes, focusing on really the heart of the fishing season from June through mid-August. But after we partnered with some gear and tackle manufacturers, Costa Sunglasses, Hoagie Lures, they donated a bunch of stuff that allowed us to extend these raffle prizes through October and really help us keep up this participation throughout the entire season. One of the best parts of the project was getting to meet some of these raffle prize winners. They would stop by one of our offices to pick up their prize, and we got to talk to them about what worked, what was frustrating with doing this work, and it was clear that these folks are really passionate anglers and are really invested in being part of the conservation of this species. So we had a sort of well thought out and planned social media campaign to get our message out, make people aware of this program. But looking back on the season, it really became clear that our partnerships with local, regional, and national fishing organizations were a huge part of the success of this project. And this is something that we will definitely be taking with us as we go into our second year of citizen science. Now, the last partnership that I'll talk about is with this group called Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. This is a national conservation organization with hundreds of thousands of members. And they too wanted to be part of this project, and they generously offered to sponsor our data portal. And if you're familiar with Shiny applications, this is a Shiny app that provides the public with live access to the citizen science data as it's being reported. So you can go to this website listed in blue here, and you can see the patterns sort of unfold throughout the season as we see them. So I'll walk through some of the results from our first year of citizen science data, pulling these figures directly from our data portal. So we had almost 700 people sign up for this program, the majority of which came from Massachusetts, which is to be expected given that we're the Massachusetts Division of Marine Fisheries. But we welcomed anyone from any Atlantic coast state that wanted to participate and send in data. And anyone who's done a citizen science project in the past knows that there's a difference between people that sign up and those that participate. We had about a 25% participation rate, which we considered pretty good compared to past projects. There was a wide range of experience levels. It's good to see, but many of our participants were really active, avid anglers that fished a large number of days, which was good for this project. More trips equals more fish equals more data. So in total, our anglers reported almost 900 trips, over 3,600 bass. The vast majority of these came from individual citizen scientists that participated. Because we weren't sure how many reports we were going to get from citizen scientists, we also conducted some of our own dedicated sampling trips, and we partnered with a few charter boats to try to make sure that we had a baseline amount of data. But it ended up being really successful, and the citizen scientist was the lion's share of the data. Just like the distribution up along the coast of where the signups came from, most of the fish were reported from Massachusetts, although about 30% came from other states, from some pretty dedicated anglers in Connecticut, Maine, Maryland, and other states further south. So of the fish that were reported, about 3/4 of them came from artificial lures. And midwater lures, so swimming baits and plugs, were the most popular category, but we did have several hundred observations in each of our lure categories. Of the fish that were reportedly caught via bait, about 85% were caught using live bait, and 90% of those fish were caught using just two species, mackerel and menhaden. Now, this is probably an intuitive result, but there was a strong pattern of larger fish being caught with larger lures. And this explains the distribution of sizes we saw in the different lure categories. So fly fishermen typically catch smaller bass because their lures are a bit smaller than the other types of lures. And this in turn impacts fight time and handling time, because larger fish take longer to bring to the boat and take longer times to unhook. And that impacts the condition of the fish upon release. The longer you fight them, the weaker they are when released. And it's clear that once a fish is kept out of the water for more than about 2 minutes, its vitality or its ability to swim away becomes diminished. The type of lure used it impacts the level of injury that the fish experiences. So surface lures ended up with the greatest number of foul hooking, so hooks in the body outside of the mouth, and bait fishing results in the greatest number of hooks that are either swallowed or hooked in the esophagus. And this translates to poorer condition again when the fish are released. But almost more important than the type of lure is how many and what type of hooks are on lures. So single point hooks produce the lowest amount of injury. Treble hooks are slightly more, but what really makes a difference is having multiple hooks on a lure. And it's these double treble hooks that have the greatest amount of injury. Our citizen scientists recorded sort of the classic seasonal pattern of air and water temperatures. You can see that they're correlated, air and water temperature, but that water temperature is less variable than air temperature. And it wasn't until we made it through sort of the warmest part of the season that we started to see a pattern of fish condition associated with water temperature. And it's really sort of like a threshold effect that once the water warms above 75 degrees Fahrenheit, that fish have a harder time swimming away and have poorer condition. So some conclusions from this first year of citizen science work. We found this to be a really effective and efficient method of acquiring a large number of these discard mortality or discard condition observations. We collected individual observations from over 3,600 fish, primarily just for the cost of these sampling kits and raffle prizes, which in the scheme of being able to assemble a data set for applied research is a pretty cost-effective approach. And these are high-quality data because we're already starting to see so many significant patterns emerge from the information provided to date. A big takeaway from this first year is how powerful these partnerships were. Because to be honest, most people's first choice to learn about what's going on in their fishery is to go to their state agency website or social media channel, as hard as we might try to provide useful content and information. And these partnerships really increased the awareness of the project, kept participation levels high, and we're hope that this leads to greater buy-in and acceptance of results once the project is complete. And although we plan another year of citizen science work, we already have some significant findings that we can see in the early data that the discard mortality rate of artificial lures is less than that of bait. But the specific tackle choices, handling time, fight time, and water temperature are all important factors. So the next steps of this project, we need to publish the results of this first phase where we did the acoustic telemetry, and we'll be submitting a scientific journal article in the next couple of weeks. Our plan for the citizen science work for next summer is to make a concerted effort to incorporate people from other states, particularly further south where water temperatures might be a little bit warmer, so we can see more of the effect of water temperature on fish condition. And we'll begin doing these angler surveys to describe the tackle configurations used by the entire fishery. And once complete, we'll be able to assemble these pieces together and come up with a representative discard mortality rate estimate for the entire fishery. So I just want to acknowledge the full striped bass research team here at Mass DMF. I'm really fortunate to work with a really talented and dedicated set of colleagues that make this work of doing applied fisheries research a total blast. And it's a lot of fun getting to work with these folks every day. And it's clearly fun for our citizen scientists. We had tons of people send in photos. They were proud to participate. They wanted to be part of striped bass conservation. And I hope to see many of them returning next summer. That's all I've got. So happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Micah. If you have a question, you can either unmute yourself or put something in the chat. So.
Do we raise our hands?
Yeah, yeah, or just unmute yourself and go ahead.
Hey, Micah, Cat Cove team here. Amazing talk. Such a cool project. I want to know what is needed or what are the next steps to scale your telemetry mortality estimates up with the citizen science data?
Yeah, so this like process of doing it in this like 3-step is like we call it conditional reasoning. So we now have estimates of mortality rate by each condition score. Once we get the full data set after 2 years, we will get this, figure out which variables are most important. We have some good ideas already from the data that's come in. One of these is water temperature, but we just started to see an effect just at the warmest water temperatures that we experience up here in Massachusetts. So it seems like the environment is keeps bass pretty happy in most times of the year, but we want to see what happens in the warmer waters further south. So that I think is an important thing that we're trying to capture in the coming years. And then the last bit is that, so let's say we find out that it's treble hooks are really important. And the difference between baited hooks and artificial lures. We need then to find out up and down the coast what fraction of striped bass are being released by those different tackle configurations. And so we've got to come up with a good survey mechanism to be able to capture that from striped bass anglers from North Carolina to Maine. So really it's just executing the rest of that recipe that we've done for cod and haddock and other species.
Laura online is asking, great talk. Did you do any survey with volunteers to determine the impacts of participation?
Impacts, I guess I'm not sure what you mean by the impacts of participation there. Like, we haven't done any follow-up surveys with our participants, but this is something that is a good idea, and we probably should. We've done cooperative research projects in the past, and there's been various cooperative research sort of summits where folks that have done this work in the past have come together and talked about what worked and what hasn't. And one thing that was really clear is that many participants in cooperative research they feel like the data is passed on and they don't find out what happens. They want to know the rest of the story. And this is the idea behind our data portal and our Shiny app, so that we can share real time back with the people that are doing the work what their data looks like, and we want to keep doing that. We can let them know as how that flows through the fishery management and assessment system.
Laura's second part of
Yeah.
the question, did it change any attitudes, behaviors towards conservation, working with state agencies, et cetera?
No, we didn't do that, but that would be really interesting. So unfortunately, I guess we missed our opportunity for the surveying folks before the project to see if there is, we can move the needle on the attitudes about conservation. But one thing we really found was that there's a large number of people out there that are really invested in conserving striped bass and they want to be part of it. So it's, I think in general, our constituents are motivated towards conservation. I mean, there's a lot of these fish are being released not simply due to regulations. These are choices that they have a lot of conservation ethic in our fishery.
Other questions? Oh, Mike Celestino. Go ahead.
Mike?
Hey, Micah, fantastic presentation and really great work. Thanks. What a great presentation. It sounds like you had a great team to work with, and it was really helpful to see all your partnership slides as well. I wonder if you can just maybe talk a little bit more about organizational support that made this work, as I feel like sometimes we can have support on projects at a specific level, like maybe within an office. But
Yeah.
as we kind of move up the chain, sometimes there's like, hey, this is different. We're not used to seeing this kind of thing. I wonder if you encountered any obstacles there and what you did to maybe kind of smooth over those bumps, because it seems like you guys did a great job with this. So it seems like you had exactly the right amount of support. So just wondering if you can kind of talk about any obstacles that you were able to overcome at the broader organization level.
Yeah, your intuition is right there. We didn't have a lot of internal obstacles. We had great support from the top on down. And I think that's a lot of the success that allowed us to do this work is to their credit. In particular, Mike Armstrong really championed this effort because we have to sort of understand which species are most important to the constituents in our state. And it's hard to find a species that is more important than striped bass to Massachusetts. So we feel sort of like the pressure to help make progress on this fishery and this species. And so without any sort of barriers and with a lot of support, because some of the funding for this comes from our own state funds. These are not from federal grants. This was pretty much funded out of state funding. And I feel like we accomplished a great deal with a limited amount of resources. And that's also to the credit of the team of researchers that's doing this work. We've done it for other species, so we sort of had the knowledge in hand to how to apply it for this important species. So yeah, I hope that this could serve as a model for other states that want to take a step into citizen science. And I think it can be a really effective technique in some instances to crowdsource data collection.
Yeah, terrific. Thank you.
Beth Versek of Maryland chatted, definitely some great work here. I think some Maryland people will be interested in talking with you more about it.
And that would be great. As I mentioned, we'd really like to broaden the participation coastwide in this second year. We'll be reaching out to other states at various levels to try to help us promote this, but feel free to spread the word ahead of time. The Massachusetts fishery may get going really in May, but I know in other states it starts a little bit earlier. So we need to start this sort of promotion campaign pretty early now.
Ben.
For those of you who didn't see the chat, I do want to point out that a lot of the funding for this, as Mike was saying, came internally and specifically from the Recreational License Fund. So I just wanted to point out for people that this was money that, this is money we're getting from recreational licenses that we're using to improve the fishery for recreational anglers. That's one of those ways that we're directly using those funds, and some important work we're doing and we have been doing and will continue to do.
Thank you, Ben.
Any other questions? Seeing none, I'd like to thank Micah and everyone for showing up. And probably the next one will be in December. I'm working on that right now. So